And so the question is, does America have the vitality for one more cultural revolution, one more cultural churn, one more shift of the paradigm? And we seem a little demoralized right now. But when I ask people what made them who they are, nobody ever says, you know, I went to vacation in Hawaii and that made me the person I am today. Nobody ever says that. They always part to a hard time. They point to a moment of rupture and repair, when their life fell apart and they built it back better. I went through a period of rupture and repair in 2013. My kids were leaving home to go to college, my marriage had ended, and I was living in a crappy apartment, feeling intensely lonely. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but in one of the other lectures, I read 3 books. One by a guy named Paul Tillich, who said that moments of suffering interrupt your life and remind you you're not the person you thought you were. They carve into the floor of the basement of your soul, and they reveal a cavity below. And they carve through that and reveal a cavity below. So the moments of hardship, like the one we're in nationally, you see deeper into your own nation or your own self than you did before. Second, I read a book on Henry Nouwen, who said, when you are in pain, you have to stay in the pain to see what it has to teach you. And I was like, screw that, I want to get out of the pain. Third book was I read by a guy named Frederick Buechner, who was a novelist and also a pastor. He said, in moments of pain, you can either be broken or broken open. And when you're broken, you callous yourself over. When you're broken open, even in those moments of greatest suffering, you make yourself even more vulnerable. Because only if you do that are you capable of change. And I would say in history, we have case after case of countries breaking themselves open and saying we need to change. If you look at Britain in the 1820s and the 1830s, Australia in the 1970s, Germany and Japan after World War II, South Korea in the 1980s, Rwanda after 1994, Chile after 1990s, or you look at our own country. Look at those periods of paradigm shift, of rupture and repair. The 1770s, the revolutionary period. Andrew Jackson's populism, 1890s and the progressive era, 1960s. Look at how much culture has changed in the last 70 years. Look at how dynamic our culture is. Do we really think that the same country that shifted in the 60s from the 50s, that shifted in the 80s from the 70s, that shifted in a bad way in the last 20 years, do we really think our culture has stopped? I just don't. I think people are going to see this paradigm is not working for us and we need a change. And I think they will diagnose that the problem is a spiritual one, a psychological one, emotional one, a cultural one. We need a shift in values. We need a shift in the spirit of the age. The zeitgeist, what we call the dominant paradigm, that's just tremendously valuable. And it depends on people. Cultural shifts doesn't happen from the top. It happens from all of us. It happens in universities, but it also happens in the arts. It happens in community organizations. It happens in religious organizations. Culture is the common collective response to the problems of the moment. And people just spontaneously shift. That's how these cultures change. And I have every confidence, looking at history, we've been through this before. It's a question of how we all act, whether we decide we're in a doom loop of resentment and we just say, stop, stop. We're not going to participate. We're going to find people who exemplify the higher virtues. I was at a bar a couple of years ago, and if you had seen me there, you would have said, sad guy drinking alone. But I call it reporting. And I was scrolling, and it was like a month after October 7th. And as you can imagine, I was on Twitter scrolling through all these brutal images. And it was horrible. But then I scroll across an image that was different. And it was an interview probably done like in the early 60s with James Baldwin. And Baldwin is talking to an unseen interviewer, and he says, you know, there's not as much humanity in the world as one would like. But there's more than you would think. There's enough. And then he says, well, you got to remember, when you walk down the street, every person you see, that person could be you. You could be that person. And that person has so much in common with you. And so you've got to look at those people and say, that could be me. I could be that wonderful person. I could be that shitty person. And you've got to decide who you're going to be. Now, James Baldwin, because of the way he'd been treated by this country for his race and other reasons, had been treated pretty shabbily in America. He had every right to be calloused over. He had every right to be bitter. And sometimes he was bitter. Sometimes he was angry, if you read his writing. But even in this circumstance, he was making a statement that's the ultimate source of humanism, that every person you see, you could be that person could be you. And the phrase that leapt to my mind when I saw that was defiant humanism. That even in the cruelest and most resentful and suspicious and distrustful times, it's possible to say, no, I'm standing for the higher virtues, I'm standing for the highest ideals, I'm standing for the deepest humility, and I'm standing for a cultural shift against resentment and toward admiration. And I think we're all called upon to do that today. Thank you.